Hello everyone, and welcome to my Week 5 battle against Kangaroo Jolty and the South Norfolk Noiverns. So this one's gonna have to be a post-com, unfortunately, because apparently my audio did not record during the battle. Right before the battle, my mic had unplugged, but I plugged it back in, and it said it was working. But I guess it wasn't. So yeah, this is gonna have to be a post-com. So I hate post-coms because you can really kind of tell what's gonna happen in battles before they actually happen just by the way I'm gonna talk about things, and like it's just an inevitable, inherent trait of post-com. So you know what's gonna happen when I'm talking about it, but I'm going to do my best to explain my thought process during the game. Even though I could totally be bullshitting everything I'm saying because this is a post-com. I'm going to try and be honest with you guys. So yeah, off of lead matchup, he has a Rampardos, which I do not have switch-ins to. But the thing is, most of my mons outpace it, and it can't get a free switch-in on anything. So, so long as I can keep faster mons in, then I should be able to keep him out. My Celesteela also is very hard for him to switch into, and he doesn't have a Houndoom which pressures it. So his only way to beat the Celesteela is with the Zeraora or maybe the Rampardos, but the Rampardos can't come in on it. Neither can the Zeraora safely. So yeah. T-Spikes also look pretty good this game. He does have a Defogger and Crobat, or potential Defogger. And should Zeraora go down, Archeops can really spam Acrobatics very freely. So, let's get into it. I decided to lead, for lead matchup, I decided to lead my Landorus. I initially was going to always lead my Altaria because I needed to get the Mega off as early as I could to check the Zygarde, but he ended up not bringing Zygarde, which shocks me because it has a really good matchup against me. I don't have a bulky ground type, but since he doesn't bring the Zygarde, I don't need the early Mega on Altaria, so I don't need to lead with it. So instead I can lead with something that's a bit more helpful, and so I decided to lead with my Landorus because it's the only thing that really it leads well. It keeps Rampardos out, which is super important. Gives me U-turn support because it is scarfed against things like Cress, but most importantly, it's my only thing that outruns the Zeraora. So if he leads with the Zeraora, I can force him out through the threat of Scarf. So I lead, and he does indeed lead with the Zeraora. So here, I expect him to respect the possibility that I could be scarfed, and I am scarfed, so I go for the U-turn, expecting him to switch. And even if he is scarf, then I at least get the information and can go into something that can eat the HP Ice. But I don't think scarf makes sense this matchup, as he goes into his Crest, which is really nice for me because I get the U-turn off. And that reveals to be a max HP Crest right there, which probably means he had a lot of speed. Which makes sense because he probably want to outrun things like Mamoswine and Breloom. So I go straight into my Gren to force him out with the Dark Pulse and be able to get up my T-Spike. Because T-Spike is going to be very good against this team, and he has no poison types to crush it. So here, I just get up my T-Spike, and he actually stays in Moonlights, which is quite a play right there, because if I was Specs, which I am, Dark Pulse was doing over half and had the chance to flinch, so you had a 20% chance to just have a 20 HP Crest right there. And you weren't gaining anything from it, except for maybe information, but you were risking the 20% chance of dying. I don't think that's a particularly good play when you have a Primarina, but he does go for it, and I just get a T-Spike for free, which I'm cool with. Here, I think he might Moonblast, and since I'm Specs, I'm locked into T-Spikes, and it's not worth a second T-Spike. So I'm going to go into my Celesteela, which walls Cresselia for days, and is very hard for him to deal with. So I make the switch here into my Silly, as he does indeed go for the Moonblast. So here, he can do a few things. Here I have the option to Earthquake, Toxic, or Elite Seed. Toxic hits everything but the Crobat, but I feel like the Crobat is fairly likely here, especially because it could have Defog to get rid of this T-Spike. I could click, but if he goes into his Zeraora, which threatens me, then I'm going to have to find a way to switch into it, and it is difficult to switch into because he could have coverage for anything really. And since my Altaria is not Mega'd, that can't switch in, which would typically be my best switch in. So I have to make a decision between Earthquaking to keep the Zeraora out, or at least, I don't think it would keep it out, but it would punish it heavily. Elite Seeding and Toxicking, but I do feel that he's probably going to go into the Crobat and get that play right and go for the Elite Seed. Because it makes sense for him to go for the Defog. So here I switch out, fearing into my Muck, fearing the fact that he could have Super Fang or Heat Wave. And I don't want my Silly getting too low. But I do have to be careful with my Muck because it does sort of invite his Rampardos in, which is I do not want to ever have to switch into. And he U-turns here, so I Ice Punch just to get some good damage on him. But I do feel that the Gaster is probably going to come in. That also could have at least chipped the Rampardos if I needed it, if it was going to come in. So he gets the Gastro in. And so here I just go right into Altaria because because since he didn't bring Zygarde, Altaria is much less pressured and much more free to kind of fill the role of Cleric and checking Zeraora. And I didn't want to risk burning my him burning my Muck or my Selly, so I decided to go into Altaria. As he goes for the Toxic, which I'm completely fine with because I have Heal Bell. So I'm just going to fire off a Hyper Voice to just get some damage, force him to recover as he Toxics again. So I'll just Heal Bell this right off as he will recover the next turn. Yeah, so right now I'm just kind of scouting out what he has and trying to wear down his fat. As he tries Toxicking again, I'm not sure why, because I did just reveal the Heal Bell. But I go into my Selly here just so that I can start really breaking down his fat, because now my Altaria's Mega, I can get in much more freely. And if he does happen to burn this, then it's easier to get my Altaria in and Cleric him back up with the Heal Bell. So he Toxics, that doesn't really get him anywhere. So I'm just going to fire off Leech Seed, expecting him to switch out and Leech Seed to be able to help with anything, as he just fishes for burns, which I'm fine with because I have Heal Bell. So I'm just going to Toxic this and wear this down, and this is one of his best Archeops responses, along with Crest, which invites in my fat, which is hard for him to switch into. So yeah, he's just really letting this thing get weakened, and once this and Crest both get weakened, he's going to have a really hard time with Archeops. So I'm absolutely fine with him letting this get weakened here. So here I make the play into my Gren, thinking that he'll either switch out, and Gren has a good matchup against pretty much anything he can switch out into here, except for like maybe Primarina, but that doesn't make sense. And if he doesn't switch out, then Greninja can eat any hit and lay up a Toxic Spike, which is definitely very nice for me right now. And with Leech Seed support, his Scalds, even if he burns, aren't going to be hurting me too much. So I try to go into Gren to probably either get my Toxic Spikes up or force out whatever he switches into. And he goes into the Crobat. And so here I'm like, what is he revealed up until this point? Okay, he revealed U-turn Defog. So yeah, oops, I just scrolled out the screen. Here I know for a fact he's going to go for the U-turn. So I think to myself, well, he's U-turning here. So he's probably gonna U-turn on my Gren and go into the Primarina. So I could get up a Toxic Spike. And I think, well, you know, if he's going to the Primarina and I know he's U-turning, I'll just go into my Muck, because that'll beat the Primarina, which is obviously extremely flawed thinking, because he's going to U-turn on the Muck if I switch into that and then go into his Rampardos and claim a life. But my broken brain Didn't think about that. I just have really bad brain farts sometimes, and yeah, my brain just did not wrap its head fully around that one. So I'm gonna get punished for it. Absolutely shitty play. A brain fart. I should have just thrown up my T-Spike. He would have gone to Primarina. Everything would have been good. Then I would have gone into this. But he gets Rampardos in here for free, which is really bad for me. I decided I want to keep the Muck around because it can check the Primarina. And it can, if this Rampardos does go down, it has high potential to win the game. So I think it's pretty valuable here. So I just go and sack off the Altaria to what I think is going to be... yeah, which ends up being a banded head smash. It could be Life Orb at this point. I can't necessarily tell. For sure, it either was a max roll Life Orb Adamant head smash or a banded head smash. There's no other options there. He is Sheer Force, so I can't be sure. Altaria did, though, if he wasn't head smash, eat up pretty much any hit, just because it is full Fizz Def. But he ended up being head smash, which is able to just completely obliterate it. So here, bring in my Archeops, and decide that Earthquake is the best play because he'll probably just go into his Crest, and I can just U-turn on that immediately after. But if I U-turn immediately and decide to stay in, then I'm in a really bad spot. So yeah, he just stays in, and then I can U-turn, and if he wants to make an aggressive play, then I keep the momentum, and if he stays in, he's going to take massive damage and allow Selly to come in, which is going to be a pain in the ass for him to switch into still. He does Moonblast, trying to catch the Gren, which I did consider going into, but I decided I didn't want to risk the Moonblast, because then I did want to get my T-Spike still, but taking that Moonblast on Gren was doing like half, and I did not want to take that damage. So here, I decided that the Zeraora is he might want to bring the Zeraora in, because he's not seeded at this point, and that's really his only thing to threaten us out, and there's no T-Spikes up. So I decided to try and catch it and go for the Earthquake, but he does not. But at least I've shown that I'm willing to catch the Zeraora coming in, and possibly scared him out, and deterred him from trying to bring it in the future. But here I'm just going to seed the Crobat, just get some recovery, and then just Flamethrower for some damage. As he defogs, I guess he thought defog was like Rapid Spin, how Rapid Spin gets rid of Leech Seed, but it doesn't. Defog does not get rid of Leech Seed, so misplay by him. So here I have an extremely free Earthquake because Zeraora, Rampardos, and Primarina all do not appreciate coming in on the Earthquake. If he wants to Roost, which is his only way to get health back, he's going to get hit hard by the Earthquake. His only options are going into Gastro or Crest, neither of which can do anything to this. So he's in a really shit spot. Like I said in my team builder, Celesteela puts him in a really shit spot because he can't go into Zeraora because I can Earthquake or Rampardos. Primarina will not beat this one-on-one. Even no, I won't reveal anything, but like Primarina was never going to beat a Celesteela one-on-one. He can't go into Gastro or Crest because they can't touch me, and if he stays in, he's going to die to subsequent Earthquakes. So he does Roost here, and I have no reason not to Earthquake. So I Earthquake here, and then I think at this point he realizes the situation he's in. So he does U-turn here, as I have no reason to not keep clicking Earthquake. As he goes into his Crest, which, like I said, I'm fine with, because this thing cannot touch me. So I'll just put up another seed. But here, I did think he might go into a Zeraora, and I had Earthquake click too. But I eventually decided against it because I didn't think he would do it because I was clicking Earthquake so much, but he does go straight into his Zeraora. I'm like, oh shit, dude, why? Because I was so close to clicking Earthquake, but Leech Seed is still fine here because I can go into my Landorus, eat up pretty much any hit that isn't Specs HPIs. And even if he does HPS on the prediction, so long as he's not Specs, I can eat it and get some Leech Seed recovery back. So I do make the play into my Landorus as he does his Plasma Fist, which is great for me. So here, I had U-turn clicked. I was like, yeah, he's going to respect the Scarf again, switch out. And then I was like, You know what? I've got 3 electric weeks. I feel like he could definitely make the play here of just double plasma fisting to try and catch one of my guys on the U-turn. And I think right here I am pretty far ahead. So I feel like that's definitely a play he can make to try and get himself back in the game, is to force a sack here by clicking plasma fists again. So I had U-turn clicked, but I was like, you know what, he could definitely make that play of double plasma fisting, and that would be definitely an acceptable play to make at this point because he's pretty far in the back and he really has no way to deal with my Selly. So I decided to switch from that to Earthquake, especially because Earthquake, he could bring in his Crobat, which is a little bit of an issue, but if Crest comes in on the Earthquake, that's absolutely fine with me. So I decided to Earthquake here instead of going for the U-turn eventually, and he stays in, which is great for me. He told me after that he wasn't predicting me to U-turn, but rather just didn't know I was Scarfed, so I guess, I don't know, I thought it was pretty obvious I was Scarfed from turn 1 when I stayed in on it and then U-turned. Like, you don't do that unless you're Scarf. But I guess he didn't know, but the play ends up working out for me anyways. But I don't know what to think about that play after that, but it does work out in my favor nonetheless. He knows I'm Scarf at this point, and he goes into his Primarina, which is kind of weird. So at this point, I think, well, Landorus outsped the Zeraora, which was very useful, but at this point, Landorus kind of outlives its usefulness. Because there's nothing Landorus can't do that Archeops and Greninja don't do better, because they're just stronger offensive threats. But I do decide that if I can weaken this Primarina, then Greninja is going to go in, because look at his Dark Resist if this Primarina gets weakened. They don't exist. So I decide that there's nothing that my Landorus can't do. Like, up until this point, I needed Landorus to have something faster than Zeraora, faster to revenge it. That's why I needed to keep this around. But now that Zeraora is down, like this, my Landorus wasn't doing anything to the Crobat anyways. And my other two offensive Mons outspeed everyone else besides Crobat, and this wasn't hitting Crobat hard anyways. He has a Crest, and which is really, I'm never gonna do much damage with my Landorus with Crest around unless I U-turn. But Archeops has the U-turn anyways, so I think it doesn't make sense to keep this around, especially when he's given me the opportunity right now to weaken his Primarina, which will allow my Gren to do some massive damage. And he does stay in here, and then he over-predicts and clicks Moonblast, which is absolutely fantastic for me. Because now he didn't kill me, A, and B, he has a half-health Primarina, and then I can also Earthquake again if he chooses to stay in, and get this into very low range where my Gren is going to pretty much sweep at this point. There's really not, like, Dark Pulse pretty much would sweeps at this point if this Primarina gets weakened. So I'm like, okay, yeah, I'll take this damage. I can Quake him all the way down to 20%, and he Ice Beams. So I'm like, clean. Greninja's going to come in and sweep at this point, or at least, like, at the very minimum, claim a kill, because he has to sack this or sack something else. Then probably bring in... who do you bring in at this point? You can't bring in Crest. You maybe bring Gastro, but Gastro isn't doing a lot of damage. It's poisoned. He has no way to deal with Dark Pulse at this point. So I'm like, yeah, I'll just Dark Pulse and probably just sweep at this point. The game looks pretty much over. So I click Dark Pulse and it lives, and I'm like, oh shit, because like, as you can see, this Gren wins the game with Dark Pulses at this point. I'm like, oh no. So it turns out that he's a max HP, max full defense. So I knew he was full defense from the Earthquake damage on from my Landorus against it. And I thought in the back of my mind it could definitely be AV, especially because he didn't have lefties and he did change moves. But I didn't calc it. I thought, this is a Specs Greninja, he's at 20%. I know it's resisted, but it's Specs Greninja and he's at 20%. There's no way this lives. Unfortunately, I do get burned for making the assumption and not calculating it out, so even the things you seem to be most certain about, you need to calc them out or you're gonna end up in situations like this where you win the game, but then you don't. I could have gone to Archeops and forced a sack pretty much. Like, I wouldn't have forced a sack, but I would have forced Crescent, and then he would have had to try and switch into Celesteela without Azrea running around. But essentially, I threw away a 4-0 win here by being reckless. So yeah, big misplay by me. And I should have... Dark Pulse pretty much cleaned this game if... It does clean this game. If I'd gotten any more damage on this. So I get Moonblasted and lose my Mon that wins. So I'm like, oh shit, I might actually lose now. It is 3-5, but I do definitely have a bit of an upper hand here because he has no way to beat my Celesteela. He has no Archeops switch-ins. I do have no Rampardos switch-in, so I do have to do my best to keep that out, but that shouldn't be too hard. So I get to go into my Archeops here. And Acrobatics should claim one, or at the very least, force him into Cresselia and have to take a U-turn, and then if he takes that U-turn, then I can go into my Celia on it, and he has to find a way to switch into that. But he actually just sacks off his Gastrodon here, which I'm fine with. So yeah, I just Acrobatics here. I need to keep this in so that Rampardos doesn't get a free turn, so I can't U-turn here. So he brings in the Crobat, and I think at this point he's revealed Roost, Defog, and U-turn. And I think to myself, his last move has to be something to touch Breloom, because I have a Breloom on my team, and this team is going to get like, if you look at his team and he doesn't have a move that touches Breloom, he gets absolutely destroyed by it. So I think his last thing has to be a move that touches Breloom. So it's got to be Heat Wave, or it's got to be Brave Bird or Air Slash. That only makes sense. So I decided to stay in here because none of those can put me into Defeatus range, and I do get that right. He has Brave Bird. So I Acrobatics this again. Like, he could have had HP Ice or something, but that just doesn't make sense. So here he goes into his Crest, I can just U-turn, and if he goes into his Rampardos, that's fine. And if he stays in, then I can just bring in my Selly. And he just Moonlights, which is fine with me. So here, I'm in a situation where if he has to either stay in, if he switches something, whatever he goes into will die to my Earthquake, and if he stays in, this can never touch me. So I think, okay, well, I'll just Earthquake, make sure that Rampardos doesn't come in, because if he brings Rampardos in on Earthquake, I'm in a super shit situation because I need to sack. So I just EQ here, trying to keep Rampardos out. And I just continue to EQ here, and then I realize he's going for the freeze. I'm like, shit. Because I obviously keeping the Rampardos out is the play. I need to keep that out because I cannot afford to stack here. But if he does get the freeze on me, that's going to be really bad. So here, I'm pretty sure it's here. I decide to Toxic him, put him on the timer. So at the very least, because I was pretty sure he was going to keep going for the freeze, and even if he didn't, I at least put the Rampardos on the timer. But that means the Crest can't just stay here in infinitely Ice Beam, and then I'm free to click Earthquakes. Oh, actually, okay, here I made the play into Muck, because I expected him to keep staying in and trying to freeze me, and I decided that I needed Selly more, so I decided I wanted to go into my Muck to make sure I didn't get frozen on my Selly, because I'd much rather Muck be frozen at this point. So he just Moonblasts me. It puts me into my berry range as I get to Poison Jab it, which is fine with me. Or I Ice Punched to keep the Rampardos out, if you wanted to go hard into that. And he brings in Rampardos here. So here, he goes for... I decide that if he goes for Head Smash, he will kill himself. So if he goes for Head Smash, the game is over. And I definitely cannot risk either of my other two members because they're far too important. So I decide he either has to Head Smash and kill himself, or not Head Smash and I'll probably live. But he could band himself into Earthquake. He was a hair afraid if he wasn't banded, and that was actually a Life Orb max roll earlier, then I'm in a pretty shit spot because he could Life Orb Earthquake, and then I'm forced to go into Archeops, and then if I Earthquake into Cress, and then this game starts to get a little bit muddy. But here, I'm just really hoping that he clicks head smash and kills himself in not earthquake, and he does click head smash and he does die, and I'm like, ooh, okay. Now I win for sure. So I can just bring in my Selly and 1v1 the Crest. That was a bit of a close call there. He said he expected to live on 1. I'm not sure if he thought that it was based on pure percentage, because it's the amount of health he does to my Muck. And maybe it was a bit of a roll, I'm not sure, or maybe he didn't know my HP investment. But however much HP he does to my Muck, he takes half of that in return. So I should have won this game 4-0, I think, if I didn't play recklessly with my Gren. Not even recklessly, I played it very safe. I just didn't calc that last interaction. But Celesteela will be able to 1v1 the Crest, even if he freezes me. There's like nothing he can do unless he like freezes me for a full eternity, and even then I'm pretty sure he would die of Leasied and Toxic before he ever did anything to hurt me. So I do come out with the win. I think I prepped very... Ooh, I just dropped my fucking phone. I prepped very well for not only what mons he would bring, but the style he would play him. Like I said, my team builder, Celesteela would be a menace for him to switch into because it beats his fat, but his offense doesn't want to come in on it. And he really only had one mon that could come in on it, and he had to fear Earthquake the entire time. And he did risk it one time, and he did get the play right of coming in on it. But even then, he ended up sacking it to a Landorus, which I don't think was a great play. I mean, like I said, it was definitely a play he could make if he was trying to make that ballsy read, but yeah. Celesteela just was incredibly hard for him to deal with. And although he did have the Rampardos that kind of shut down the Muck, that also could have been really hard for him to deal with, especially if he had brought the Zygarde, because it could have beat the Zygarde as well, or at least weakened it. So yeah, that's the game, and I'll see you next week.